The fluorescent lights in the hospital room buzzed faintly overhead as I stared at the word no one wants to see, malignant. My mouth was dry. My heart was thudding, not in panic, but in something colder. Like the world had shrunk to a single sheet of paper and a single word that would change everything. I didn't cry. Not yet. Instead, I reached for my phone with trembling fingers and dialed the only people who should matter in a moment like this, my parents. It rang 4 times before my mother picked up. I could hear laughter in the background, clinking plates. A party. Hello. We're at your cousin Sir's engagement dinner, she said, clipped and distracted. Mom. I tried to steady my voice. I'm calling from the hospital. I just got my test results back. I have cancer. There was silence. Not shock, silence. She sighed. Can this wait until tomorrow? Your father's giving a speech soon. Then she hung up. An hour later, she sent a message, by the way, your dad and I need $2,000 to help cover Thomas' college fees. He's really stressed. Please send it soon. The word malignant might as well have been etched into my bones. I sat motionless in the cold, too-white hospital room, the report still warm from the printer in my hand, as if that mattered. I read it once. Twice. My mind tried to make it something else. Anything else? But it was there, in black ink, stage 2 invasive carcinoma. I felt no tears. Just a strange, hollow stillness, like the part of me that used to believe everything could be okay, had quietly packed its bags and left. The nurse said, "You shouldn't be alone right now." I nodded like I agreed. Then I did what I thought any daughter would do, I called my parents. Surely, this was the kind of news that reset relationships. Surely, this would matter. It rang 4 times before my mother answered. The background noise hit first, cheerful chatter, clinking plates, upbeat music. Yes, she asked sharply, like I was interrupting. We're at your cousin Sir's engagement dinner. What is it, Mom? My voice cracked. I'm at the hospital. They just told me I have cancer. There was a pause. 1 heartbeat. 2. Then a sigh. Well, that's unfortunate, she said. But can we talk tomorrow? Your father's about to give a toast, and people are staring. The call disconnected before I could even process it. I stared at the phone in disbelief. Maybe she was in shock. Maybe she'd call back in 5 minutes. She didn't. But exactly 57 minutes later, my phone buzzed. A message from her. It read, also, your dad and I need $2,000 to help cover Thomas' school expenses. Can you send it this week? No. How are you? No, we'll come see you. Just a request for money. And that was the moment I realized my diagnosis didn't change anything for them. But it was going to change everything for me. The ride home from the hospital was a blur of headlights and unanswered questions. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even feel angry, yet. Just numb. Like I was moving through a world that no longer recognized me. When I got back to my tiny apartment, the silence was louder than the city outside. The corners of my living room still held remnants of a life I had once tried so hard to make proud. Graduation plaques on the wall, a family photo that hadn't been updated since Thomas was 12, and a wilted birthday plant my parents sent me last year, no card, just a payment confirmation. I sat on the edge of my couch and reread the message my mother had sent. I half expected a follow-up, something, anything, human. But all that followed was a second message, sent from my father's account this time. Don't let this affect your work. And please remember your brother needs your help right now. He's under pressure. It was like they were allergic to my suffering. My cancer was an inconvenience to their carefully curated image of family perfection. Growing up, I had always been the dependable one, the quiet daughter who got scholarships, never got in trouble, never needed anything. Thomas, 2 years younger, had always been the loud one, the one they praised no matter how many times he failed upward. When he dropped out of his first college program, they said he was figuring himself out. When I got into a master's program, they didn't even ask what I was studying. But I held on, thinking that if I just kept doing well, being good, being useful, they would see me. Now, even with cancer, they still didn't. Instead of comfort, I got a bill for emotional debt I never signed up for. And then came the final gut punch. I found out they had already told extended family about my diagnosis, but not to rally support. No, they had framed it as yet another burden I was putting on them. My aunt called and said gently, "Don't worry, your parents said they'd handle it. You just stay quiet and focus on treatment. No need to make a fuss or worry anyone." A fuss. I was dying, and the people who raised me cared more about appearances than my life. And even then, they still wanted money. That night, I curled into a ball on the floor, still in my work clothes, shaking, not from the cancer, but from the kind of loneliness that doesn't have a name. And somewhere in that dark, cracked place, a small, hot spark ignited. They didn't care. So I would stop trying to earn their care. I would care for myself instead. For days after the diagnosis, I drifted in and out of sleep, like a ghost in my own life. My body was still here, but my mind kept floating, past memories, old questions, the echo of my mother's sigh, and the mechanical, "Can you send the money this week?" on repeat. But then, something shifted. I opened my laptop to review my finances, not to send the $2,000, but to assess whether I could survive this storm alone. And as I scrolled through my spreadsheets, budgeting tabs I'd kept hidden like a secret identity, I realized something even I had forgotten. I had built a life without them, quietly, steadily, year by year. I had an emergency fund. Health insurance I paid for myself. A side savings account labeled Dream Studio, where I'd tucked away every bonus and freelance gig I ever earned. I wasn't rich. But I wasn't helpless either. And that's when the fog began to lift. They had always seen me as the independent one, so independent they forgot I had feelings. But they also never knew what it took for me to become that girl. While Thomas was praised for showing up, I had to be perfect just to be tolerated. While they were pouring money into his tutors and second chances, I was taking night shifts at the library to cover textbooks. I was the backup plan. The Plan B daughter. Reliable but invisible, and yet, I had survived. Thrived, even. I remembered something my old college roommate once told me: "You're the type that breaks quietly, then rebuilds in silence. People mistake that for weakness. It's not." I looked in the mirror that night, truly looked, and for the first time since the diagnosis, I didn't see a victim. I saw a survivor in progress. The next morning, I made 3 decisions. I would begin treatment, and I would not go through it silently. I would not give my parents another cent. I would start painting again, not for a dream, but for myself. So I cleared the kitchen table, dug out the dusty watercolor set I hadn't touched in years, and began to paint. Slowly. Sloppily. But the colors bled like something sacred, like proof that I was still here, still fighting, and that I wasn't just a patient or a disappointment. I was a person, and I was about to reclaim every inch of my story. It began with a message from my coworker, Lena. "Hey," she wrote, "saw this online. I didn't know your family set up a fundraiser." I blinked at her text. Fundraiser. She sent me the link. It was a slick Gotham page titled, "Support Our Daughter's Battle with Cancer," with a cropped photo of me from college, smiling and healthy, next to a block of emotional manipulation. "Our daughter has always been strong, never asking for help. But now, she's fighting for her life, and we are drowning in medical costs. Every cent helps. Please, if you can find it in your heart." My throat closed. The words blurred. They were raising money for me, without my consent. And they were lying. I hadn't asked them for a dime. I hadn't even seen them. They hadn't come to a single appointment. But here they were, pretending to be the devoted, grieving parents of a brave girl they could barely bother to call. The donations were already climbing, $6,000, $9,000 by the next day, over $30,000. I was furious, but I didn't go off in a rage. I had learned their game. Loud emotions just made me the ungrateful daughter. Instead, I became meticulous, quiet, focused. I took screenshots of the page, the updates, the comments. I created a folder labeled False Fundraiser. I contacted GoFundMe support and opened a case file, citing impersonation and misuse of funds. Then, I started calling people, not as a victim, but as someone finally ready to tell the truth. My uncle, who donated $5,000, was stunned. They told us you were unconscious, he whispered. I was never unconscious, I replied. I was alone. And very conscious that they were not there. He didn't say anything else. But 2 hours later, he posted publicly, I was misled. I want to know where my money went. That one post. It spread like wildfire. Extended family started asking questions. Neighbors, old friends from church, even my high school art teacher messaged me. And then something unexpected happened. People started donating to me. Directly. Quietly. Without drama. And with it came messages, I'm sorry no one showed up for you. You inspire me. My sister had cancer. She never had the words. Your art says it for her. Because yes, while my parents were playing puppet masters, I had kept painting. I'd turned the corner of my living room into a makeshift gallery of grief and healing. I started posting the pieces online. And people responded. Not with pity. But with recognition. They saw in my story not just tragedy, but truth. The truth of being used. Ignored. Taken for granted. And rising anyway. The stakes were no longer just personal. Now, it wasn't just about money. It was about the truth. And who got to tell it? And this time, it was going to be me. They underestimated me. They always had. When I was a child, my quietness was seen as weakness. When I grew older and stopped expecting affection, they called it maturity. When I got sick, they assumed I'd stay silent, fold inward like always. But not this time. This time, I wasn't just going to survive. I was going to expose them. The GoFundMe campaign was still live. My mother even updated it with a new photo of me in a hospital bed, taken without my knowledge during a short, tense visit, when they dropped off prepackaged soup. The caption read, "She's staying strong, but every day is a struggle. We're doing our best to cover her needs, but the costs are overwhelming." It was a performance. And they were about to lose their audience. First, I filed an official fraud complaint with GoFundMe, providing hospital records, my own social media accounts, and proof I had never consented to the fundraiser. The platform responded swiftly, freezing the account while investigating. Then I contacted the donors I could identify, each message carefully crafted, without bitterness. I told the truth plainly. I didn't start the fundraiser. I wasn't aware of it. I've received none of the funds. But I deeply appreciate your kindness. People were shocked, but supportive. They started sharing my side of the story. Quiet ripples began to grow. And I didn't stop there. I created a public Instagram and titled it, Healing, Loudly. Each post was a painting, raw, abstract, painful. My bald head. My lonely hospital chair. A girl staring at a phone, waiting for love that wouldn't come. But the captions were where the power lived. I didn't name names, I didn't have to. I just told the truth. And the truth struck people like lightning. Follow after follow. Comment after comment. Messages from survivors, daughters, sons, people who had also been emotionally abandoned by the very people meant to protect them. Then came the invitation from a local community center. We saw your work. Would you be willing to exhibit? We'd love to host an event themed, What We Survive. I said yes. I used my own savings to print canvases, frame the most resonant pieces, and rent a small gallery corner. I expected 20 people to come. Over 100 showed up. Some came for the art. Some came for the story. Some just came to say, I believe you. And on the walls hung more than images. They were my voice, my proof, my war cry. I had turned my illness into illumination. And I had done it without a cent from my parents. Meanwhile, they were scrambling. My uncle demanded to see a breakdown of how the GoFundMe money was spent. My cousin asked me directly if the story they told was true. And Thomas, sweet, spoiled Thomas, had the gall to call me and say, why are you making them look bad? I didn't yell. I didn't defend myself. I simply said, I'm not making them look bad. They're doing that all by themselves. It happened during Qingming Festival, the one time of year where my parents insisted we show up as a united family. A time to honor the dead, though we rarely honored the living. I hadn't planned to go. But when I heard from my aunt that they were planning to use the gathering to make a heartfelt speech about my bravery and our family's sacrifices, I knew I had to be there. I didn't want revenge. I wanted truth to finally walk into a room that had been filled with lies for decades. I arrived quietly, late on purpose, wearing no makeup, a scarf over my still growing hair. My mother froze when she saw me. My father's eyes narrowed. Whispers rippled through the cousins and uncles. You look better, my mother said, forced and brittle. I am better, I said. Not thanks to you. They led me to a chair in the front row like nothing had happened, like we were a family. I sat, not for them, but for everyone else who'd been watching the fundraiser, the gallery, the growing rift. Then my father stood up with a microphone. He cleared his throat. As many of you know, our daughter has been battling cancer. It's been a challenge for the whole family. We've done everything we can to support her, financially, emotionally. A small laugh slipped from my lips. It was quiet, but sharp. Heads turned. I stood up. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I just said, you didn't support me. You raised money using my pain. You used my face to lie. You didn't visit, call, or care until it made you look like heroes. Silence. Like a glass shattering in slow motion. I never got a cent of the GoFundMe. But I saw you wearing new clothes. Hosting dinners. Posting about me as if I were some project you were managing. My mother flushed a deep red. We did that for you. No, I cut her off, still calm. You did that for control. For appearances. You used me the same way you always have, until I became inconvenient. My father stepped forward, voice tight. You're sick. You're not thinking clearly. That was the moment I pulled out a stack of printed screenshots and hospital records, neatly labeled. I placed them on the table in front of the entire family. I've filed a fraud report. I've contacted donors. This isn't drama. It's evidence. My uncle picked up one of the papers and scanned it. His face went blank. I gave you $5,000, he said slowly, turning to my father. You told me she was unconscious. That you needed it to transfer her to a specialist. My parents looked trapped, corners tightening, nowhere to run. My mother reached for excuses. We were under pressure. It was a misunderstanding, but someone else in the room spoke up. My cousin. No, it wasn't. You lied. And you lied to all of us. For once, the shame didn't fall on me. It landed where it always should have, on them. After the confrontation, I didn't linger. I left the documents on the table, and walked out of that room like it was a burning house, and I was finally done holding the match. In the weeks that followed, the fallout spread fast. The fundraiser was officially shut down. GoFundMe ruled in my favor, and froze the funds pending legal resolution. Several donors demanded refunds directly, and others threatened legal action. My parents tried to spin it, of course, said I was confused, bitter, manipulated by outsiders. But no one was listening to them anymore. The truth had found its voice, and for once, it was louder than their image. Extended family members, who had once politely looked away from the dysfunction, started sending me messages of quiet apology. My cousin invited me to speak at her university's art event even. My old high school principal reached out after seeing my gallery post on Facebook. You always had something special in you. I'm sorry we didn't see it sooner. But the most healing moment came quietly. I received a handwritten letter from a stranger, an older woman named Alice who'd seen my paintings online. Her sister had died of ovarian cancer in silence, never telling their parents for fear of being a burden. She wrote, "Your strength gave my sister a voice she never found. Thank you. You helped me understand her." That letter broke me in the best way, because that's when I realized I wasn't just healing myself. I was breaking a cycle. For others. For women like Elisa's sister. For the quiet ones. The forgotten ones. The dutiful daughters who were always last on the list. As for my parents, there was no grand apology. No redemption arc. Just silence. The first silence I welcomed. They were publicly embarrassed, quietly frozen out by the very community they'd tried to impress. Even Thomas stopped defending them after donors started tagging him in public posts. Their golden boy image cracked under pressure, and for once, I wasn't the one expected to fix it. And what did I do with that freedom? I opened my own art therapy studio, just like I'd always dreamed. It's small, bright, filled with laughter and paint-streaked children who carry wounds deeper than anyone can see. I teach them not just how to create, but how to express. How to reclaim space. How to know that their story matters. I'm still healing. I always will be. But now I wake up in the morning, breathe in the sun, sip my coffee by the window, and know this, I'm not their disappointment anymore. I'm my own miracle. The cancer is in remission. My voice is not. And no, I never sent them the $2,000.